I am so pleased and delighted to be live tonight with a panel that, as far as I know, has never been on a live broadcast together before. Right now, we've assembled the amazing team of Jared and Elizabeth Beck joining me for the first time with Larry Nichols. How are you all doing tonight?
Oh, it's great to be here, Jason. It's a historic occasion.
I agree with that. Larry, are you with us?
Yes.
And
Yes.
Elizabeth?
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Larry.
Honored to be with all of you.
It's good to be
I'm
with you,
honored,
Larry.
truly.
I heard a lot about you. Good to talk to you.
Now, there's a method to my
Well,
madness.
most of it's bad. Just believe the bad.
There's a method to my madness in bringing you guys together because, you know, Larry called me earlier today. I think that everyone is feeling, as you said, it's a historic moment, Jared. There's a lot going on with this confirmation of Brett Kavanaugh. And Larry, of course, called me. He's got a great perspective from the dirty tricks side. Larry, of course, was the Clintons' inside man for many, many years. He's got a lot of legal experience on his own in terms of going against the Clintons. And I know, Jared and Elizabeth, you guys have a lot of insight. You've dealt with well, I should say, you're very familiar with Mr. Kavanaugh's background, something that most people aren't. And I want to get into some of that. Kavanaugh's history with George W. Bush, his propensity for liking illegal spying and all that. But I want to sort of ask the panel first. I see something very dangerous going on in that we've got members of Congress instructing witnesses and the public at large that everyone has the right to be believed. Jared and Elizabeth, can you speak to that from a legal standpoint? Do we as American citizens, in fact, have the right to be believed?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. As a legal premise, I mean, it's hard. Unfortunately, we're at a stage in this country's politics where I feel that law and order is crumbling all around us as we speak. And as a lawyer who's been practicing in our legal system for 14 years, it brings me a lot of stress. Most specifically with respect to the clients that we have to do our best for on a daily basis. And I think that one of the things that may be coming apparent through this hearing, and I'm looking forward to talking more about the specifics of what went on today and really what the background is. But from a general sense, it seems to me that the public is starting to see really sweeping hypocritical positions taken in public by our public servants that serve no other purpose except naked political aims. And I think it is frightening because I think that perhaps up till this point, a lot of people who may be slowly waking up, some slower than others, are starting to get the sense that they don't live in a society that's really governed by law in any meaningful sense.
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly not a constitutional lawyer in the remotest sense, but it was my understanding that we actually have the right to be presumed innocent until proven guilty. So it seemed like a dangerous misstatement. You seem like you're desperately waiting to tell me something, Elizabeth. Please do.
You're right, but that's only a legal concept. So outside of a court of law, and I don't even know how much that is true even in a court of law, but outside of a court of law, innuendo, rumor, hearsay,
right.
It's all consumed and considered by the public.
And this proceeding, to get into the specifics of today's proceeding, this was not a legal proceeding of any kind. There may have been a prosecutor or someone who works as a prosecutor appointed to ask questions in a prosecutorial or quasi-prosecutorial manner. But that, just because of that appointment, that doesn't suddenly turn a Senate Judiciary hearing And, I recognize that the witnesses were sworn in under oath, but even that fact doesn't render a proceeding like that a legal proceeding governed by the formal rules of evidence.
It seemed to be governed by dirty
I'm on
tricks.
Twitter. I see people on Twitter, and I don't even think everybody assumes that these folks who are under oath are even telling the truth.
Oh, definitely not. Larry, let's speak to the dirty tricks aspect of what's going on. What can you tell us about your general sense of the Kavanaugh hearings so far?
Well, what is bothering me, guys, is the fact that what you're seeing today, is the death of our constitutional form of government. It's insidious. It's not like tanks rolling up and saying, okay, now we've changed your form of government, we're in a coup. No, it's not that way. But it's the subtleness of how they have literally, are in the process of literally transforming the approval process for the Supreme Court. Now, they know exactly what they're doing. This is called, he's given this name by Reagan, actually. This is called the October surprise. This move was designed specifically, now that you hear the facts of it from Feinstein and all the rest, it's obvious. They had it in plenty of time to bring it before the committee. Everything was there for them to check it out, but they didn't. Why? Because they knew they had it, and if he made it through to the point of confirmation, they were going to pull an October surprise and slam him. And that's what they've done.
Mr.
Now,
Nichols,
problem is, call me Larry. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Larry, when you say they, who do you mean?
Democrats, in this case.
So you see this as a party line issue?
Well, it is right now, but don't doubt for a second the Republicans would do it were the shoe reversed.
Well,
we have no honesty in our government.
I agree with you there.
I believe.
Do you really think of it as a partisan issue? Because I do believe Dr. Ford's family comes from a staunch line of Republican insiders. And Jerry can speak about this. He looked into it. But isn't it true that Dr. Ford's father has very deep ties into the CIA? He was very close to Bush. I mean, isn't this all true?
I don't know. See, this is where I break from most people.
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily trust the information that I get out in the social media and otherwise, and I have not investigated it myself. Now, if you're telling me you have and it's true, then I'm with you. I believe you. But I haven't personally seen anything myself.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm sorry, go ahead. I was going to say my view of this is not that it's so much a partisan issue, but it's really two political dynastic families fighting with each other, jousting almost in the public sphere. So Kavanaugh, I would think rather than calling him a Republican, what he is part of the Bush Guard. And Dr. Ford, rather than calling her a Democrat, is a Clintonite.
Well, no, wait a
minute.
I thought you said that her father was close to Bush, Elizabeth. Is it
correct?
Bush?
But my understanding is after the Bush presidencies, a lot of the Republicans fled, not so much because they didn't identify with party identification so much.
But they didn't want to be in the party of Trump.
Well, that could be true.
A lot of these blue-blooded Republican types, and I would think that this woman's father fits into this category. I mean, her father, Ford's father, and Kavanaugh's father, they go golfing together at Burning Tree.
Burning Tree is one of the most exclusive country clubs in the country. It's in Maryland. It has hosted foreign dignitaries, Congress people.
Right. I mean, it's like Skull and Bones. I mean, if you get an invitation to, not everybody.
Not in the camera.
Okay, but not everybody gets, an invitation to go golfing at Burning Tree, and this is the, both of these sides that were jousting today, and I think it really was a joust. Come from these blue-blooded families that are based in D.C. And I think the parties know each other very, very well. I think there's a lot of intra-family dynamics that are going on, and when I say family, I'm referring to a crime family that I believe encompasses not just Clinton but Bush. I believe it's melded into one, for all intents and purposes, networked criminal operation over the years. And just like any mafia operation, and you can watch The Godfather for the best explanation I know of this, but at times the mafia go to war with each other, and I think that's what we're seeing today.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more, and actually Larry can elaborate for us. I do find, and Larry, please don't take offense at this, but when I speak to people who are, older than me, like my parents and stuff, there's a mindset that has people very locked into this Democrat-Republican thing, and I agree with the line we're going down now. That stuff is out the window. That's old news. We're talking about criminals versus those that would like to expose the criminals. So Larry, what can you say about this connection between the Bushes, the Clintons? It seems like Poppy Bush started this legacy of criminality in MENA.
Spill it, Larry, spill it.
Well, number one, when I worked with the Clintons, the FBI told me, Richmond Union was his name, he was over the office, Star office here in Little Rock. He asked me, what was I doing working for the mob? I said, what are you talking about? I don't work for the mob. He said, my God, man, you work for the Stevens brothers. They're the head of the Dixie Mafia, and the Dixie Mafia is the most violent, dangerous criminal organization in the country.
Which mafia, sir?
They make Chicago. Dixie Mafia.
Never heard of it.
No, it's for the Southern Mafia.
Ah.
Yeah. Anyway.
Southern Mafia, and he said it put the New York, Chicago mobs to shame. Now, so here we've got Clinton, who I worked with, connected to, guess what? The Dixie Mafia. Now, the Dixie Mafia was connected to the Chicago mob through Hitler's dad, Dan Rostenkowski.
Yeah.
Hugh Rodham and Dan Rostenkowski took over the Chicago mob when Capone went to jail. So they merged. Then here comes MENA. And with the advent of MENA, Arkansas, for the first time, here comes the Bush family. Mm-hmm. Now the Bush family brings in a whole new dynamic. You see, with Daddy Bush being president, with the war in Nicaragua, which I was involved with everything going on, all of a sudden his organization starts growing with what? Cocaine.
Mm-hmm.
Sir, when you say
two mobs.
Sir, when you say Chicago mob, what are you referring to? Is it a
Capone.
Political organization? Is it illegal gambling and trafficking?
Gambling, prostitution, racketeering.
Right.
Okay.
The Chicago underworld.
Oh, okay.
Okay, going back to alcohol.
Okay.
But isn't it correct, guys? Wasn't the Dixie?
Go ahead, Jason.
Wasn't the Dixie Mafia, Larry and Jared? I think you guys are well studied in this area. Isn't it true that the Dixie Mafia was very connected in terms of Texas Oil, Lyndon Johnson, the JFK assassination? George Bush was involved.
Yeah, I mean this is
Bush.
No, go
It
ahead.
gets,
Yeah.
well, it gets so muddied when you start trying to put the Bush angle in it, because Bush has a whole nother interest. Their interest is oil.
Right. But I mean, that's
That's why
all
we
we.
were in Iraq. That's why we were in Afghanistan.
Right. Right. But I mean, all you have to, you look at the history of the JFK assassination, you see the role
Mm-hmm.
that Texas and New Orleans organized crime played in setting that up.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, George H.W. Bush was in Dallas on the day of the assassination. I mean, he was obviously putting together things from an organizational perspective. I mean, I don't think the dots are that hard to connect at this point, and I think you're exactly right. I mean, people don't know that, Bill Clinton's original gubernatorial run was financed by Dixie Mafia money that came through his stepfather, who was a lower level player in Hot Springs, which was, one of the core bases of the Dixie Mafia's operation for many, many years.
Yeah, and see, Bill told me, as did his father, tell me who his real dad was.
Mm.
Okay.
Who was
can you
that?
tell us?
His real dad was
Larry?
and that's why he
Wait,
was
we lost
breathed
it.
all the
We
way
lost
up
it.
to
Larry.
Oxford and all of that.
Hang on,
I
take
hear,
it back.
I hear, Larry.
Who was the dad?
Sorry.
I missed the name.
Yeah, me too.
Wilbur Mills, the
Wilbur
famous
Mills?
congressman from Arkansas. Yeah, Fanny Fox, Wilbur Mills.
And
Okay.
he was Bill Clinton's father?
He was his real father, yes.
Interesting.
Why is
Now,
that
I got
significant?
that from Bill, and I got
Yeah.
that from Wilbur.
Why is that significant that Wilbur Mills is Bill Clinton's real father?
Well, because he's connected to, longtime DC insider. He didn't just come out of
Oh, I
nowhere.
see.
Yeah.
But
the
who is
poor-
Wilbur Mills?
poor,
What did he do?
son.
For years, let me say this, for years, Washington's power players were from Arkansas, actually.
Right.
And Wilbur Mills ran practically the House.
Right.
He was that powerful.
Ways and Means Committee.
Hmm.
I mean, it doesn't get more powerful than that in the House. And, it explains how, this 28-year-old guy just out of law school could suddenly become governor of the state of Arkansas, literally out of
Right.
nowhere. I don't think that just happens by magic.
No,
We like to
and when
think
you
it
add
does.
what Bill, when you add what Bill had, he had the mob's money,
Right.
and Wilbur Mills, McClellan, and Fulbright. He had their power in Washington working for him. That's how a no-name little governor from a third-rate state, when he ran for president, all of a sudden had this massive national structure in place. It takes people forever to get a structure to run for president. Man, the day Bill announced he's running for president, he had a national organization in every major city in the country.
Yep.
Larry, why did he have a need to keep it secret that Wilbur Mills was his father? Why not just admit that?
Because he didn't want to admit for political purposes, which was partly my fault. We thought it would be a bad image for him to be a bastard child running for governor.
Yeah. I mean, being the illegitimate son of a congressperson, I mean, I don't know if it still carries, a badge of, a scarlet letter, but I'm sure back then it would have.
In the mid-'70s, I assure you guys, it was worth lying about.
Yeah.
They wanted family values and all that.
Yep, you got it.
Interesting. All right, well, let's bring it back to Judge Kavanaugh, because I'm really concerned about what appears to be a kangaroo court. I felt that the judge gave a really strong opening statement. He has a diary or a calendar that essentially, he's obviously a very diligent guy. He studied hard. Jared and Elizabeth, you guys worked really hard through high school to get into good colleges and become lawyers. And although you're excellent lawyers, you guys haven't, traveled up the chain to become judges and be nominated for the Supreme Court yet. But I'm willing to go out on a limb and say both of you were probably more busy studying and being a good student than you were drinking to excess and gang raping at parties. Is that a fair assumption?
Well,
Wow. I'll let Elizabeth speak to her experiences at Yale. I mean, I was at Harvard for 9 years. I attended public school in upstate New York, and I got into Harvard, first in my family to ever go to a school like that, based on the fact that I studied very hard in high school, and I got good grades, and I had, top standardized tests and all that. It's when you get to an environment like that, you see that some people are on different tracks than others. And, I would say that a guy like Kavanaugh was on a much different track than I was on, because he went to an elite, a DC prep school called Georgetown Prep. I mean, his father was an executive in a beverage manufacturers association. His mother was a judge. He was definitely part of the DC elite. He hung out with people like this Blasey Ford woman, who was definitely part of the DC elite, is part of the DC elite. Her father was the vice chairman of a bank that's about 100 paces from the White House, and had a special relationship with the CIA. Her brother is a lawyer at Baker Hostetler, which is a big DC law firm. After working for this bank, her father became an executive at companies that provide security to all types of high-level buildings in the DC area. These are very, very connected people, and I would go so far as to say they are part of the aristocracy that runs this country in an oligarchic fashion. We don't acknowledge them as aristocracy as Americans, because we like to think that we live in a democratic republic. But I think Larry really put the issue right on the table, which is that we've reached a point in this country's history where the Constitution has been subverted. And it hasn't been an open subversion with tanks rolling down the street, as Larry had pointed out, but it is a subversion nonetheless. And we saw living proof of that today, because this proceeding is an absolute farce, okay, from every angle. I don't care what side you thought had the better argument. I don't care if you like the Ford better than Kavanaugh, or you hate both of them, or you like both of them. The proceeding itself is an absolute farce. I mean, we're talking about something that occurred 40 years ago at basically a high school party with a bunch of rich kids in the DC area, and we're talking about it like somebody is going to be able to magically reconstruct on the basis of testimony 40 years later what exactly happened. Now, if this isn't the most lame and ridiculous and quite frankly shameful exercise and abuse of our nation's institutions in full public view, then I don't know what is.
I think that Jason.
Let me ask you this. Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
What on earth can be the result of the spectacle today, or as they go through it? I mean, what can be the outcome? It has no official function.
I understand. I have a theory on that, actually. I think it's two people from two families that are out of power, and they are basically being pitted against each other as part of a public blood sport.
In other words, distraction and entertainment for the population, so that we're not focusing on the really important things that need to get done in this country.
Isn't it also
misdirection? Is what it's called.
Exactly. Yes.
But isn't
yes,
it also
But they're
serving the
participating
function?
because they're not in power. Neither faction is currently in power, so
Well,
they have
the
no
GOP is
choice.
partly in power. Let's not forget that the GOP owns, despite Trump's victory. I mean, I make a distinction between Trump and the GOP.
Yes.
They are not one and the same.
No.
People forget
That's
that
right.
the GOP was working overtime to kill Trump, and that the Never Trump movement is still going. Okay, they may have lost, but they're still going. Okay, so but anyway,
Please keep in mind that a lot of diehard Democrats, mainline Democrats, well, a lot of mainline Republicans voted for Clinton.
right, right. But what I'm saying is, so I think it's spectacle. I think there is an element of blood sport to it. I think that the elites are eating themselves in a way, but at the same time, a lot of this is about distraction and focusing on whatever is least important, so that the population is distracted. And I think it's as simple as that.
I also think it's being used to further the narrative of red versus blue
Yeah.
within the population, because I don't think most people see the power dynamics behind the scenes where party lines don't mean as much, and so people are still cheering for what they perceive to be their political party's position. Even the and actually Judge Kavanaugh pushed this narrative at today's testimony because he kept wagging his finger at the Democrats, but let's not forget that Dr. Ford's family, she comes from a line of staunch Republicans that could not stomach Trump.
And let me point this out. The Republicans who control that committee did not have to allow this to go forward. They did not have to have the public testimony.
That's right.
If they wanted to appoint Kavanaugh, they could have just held a vote. They own complete control of that chamber, complete control of that committee. They're allowing themselves to be this to happen because at the end of the day, I think they're on the same side of as Democrats, and I think that they're aligned against the population, which I think is becoming increasingly conscious that their republic's been taken away from them.
Let me turn you guys' attention
Let
for a second.
me tell you how that structure works to help you.
Yeah.
I know for a fact, for an absolute fact, Trump gave Sessions an order, and Sessions gave it to McConnell a week ago, wasn't it, Jason? I think about a week ago. For McConnell to hold the vote, get it on that day or the next day. Vote. Go up or down. Get it over with. McConnell didn't do it. Against the counsel of the President of the United States, he did not do it.
Oh.
So you see, that connects back to, are there really Republicans? Are they really against the Democrats, or are the Republicans against Trump?
Yeah, I mean, the other thing
Trump throws a cog in all of it.
Yeah. The other thing I found curious about today's hearing is procedurally the appointment of this prosecutor to ask the questions on behalf of the Republican senators. So in other words, each of them bowed out of the opportunity to actually grill this witness in a prosecutorial manner. And instead we had this woman who asked, I thought, extremely softball, mild questions the whole way through, did not emphasize points of testimony or contradictions that may have come out, which is what a good prosecutor does. I think that was all part of the Republicans playing along and presenting a show that would bolster this woman's case as much as possible, because I'm sure they were prepared for Kavanaugh to make a forceful rebuttal, which he did.
The bottom line is,
well, they fired that prosecutor lady.
They fired
her later on.
Whoa.
Okay.
And that's why you saw the senators start asking the questions. But, you know, she came on this tough prosecutor, and I thought she was just going to ask that woman if she wanted some tea, coffee. I mean, I've never seen anybody
That's right.
bend over like they did
Right.
to that lady.
Right. Oh, I mean, there were multiple points during her testimony where a prosecutor would have dug in, emphasized contradictions. I mean, this is routine stuff. This is like first-year prosecutor stuff, okay? That was a deliberate soft pedaling of her testimony in order to put her in the best light possible, because they knew that they had Kavanaugh coming back making a forceful rebuttal, and they want this to be as close as possible. So when the ultimate result comes down, it can be sold to the American people either way.
Now,
Jared,
Larry, did you hear that the head judge of the United States Supreme Court actually issued a statement saying
No,
that,
he didn't issue a statement. He went through his biographer, but CNN reported.
Okay, but
So you have to take it with a grain of salt. But CNN reported that Justice Roberts had told his biographer that he was concerned about, the whole thing tainting the Supreme Court if Kavanaugh is indeed appointed.
Well, this speaks to points that Larry has brought up many times in our previous interviews, that there's sort of a cornucopia of desires and goals that they have, the people, not the Democrats necessarily, but the anti-Trumps who are doing this. They want to prevent anyone of any stature from accepting any kind of appointment and just basically incapacitate Trump's presidency by whatever means necessary. And I don't believe it's because they hate Trump. That's a component of it. But how did you guys feel about, like Jared raises the point that Judge Kavanaugh really stood for himself very effectively. He's obviously got a lot of experience in court. How did you feel about the interaction between Feinstein and Kavanaugh? She seemed quite nervous to me.
I think it's, I agree with your, general assessment of Kavanaugh coming across, with a very strident and impassioned defense on his behalf. And I think the sheer force was certainly visible. The problem is that I can tell you the public.
Of course he's forceful.
Well, but,
he's seeing like the best judge job in the United States.
No, it was genuine. It was genuine. It was absolutely authentic. And I think that obviously would connect with a lot of people watching. On the other hand, you have to remember at the same time, you always have to remember there's another side to this. I'm not sure that this population is really prepared for the image of a strident Supreme Court justice who speaks very forcefully on his behalf. I mean, if you look at the model of Supreme Court justices that this country is used to, I mean, they're pretty mice-like people, with maybe the exception of Antonin Scalia, who wasn't exactly a popular figure. To some, he was very popular, but he was also very much derided in the country. So I'm not sure how well that necessarily resonated with people watching. I know that, I watched the C-SPAN feed, and I was interested in what the callers had to say. And I got to tell you, a lot of people claimed to have had Ford's testimony really resonate with them. And I think that's because, unfortunately, we have a population in this country of women who have been abused and raped in their history, and this is a trauma
without justice. So
right.
Without justice.
So I want to bring up something. There have been other women who have stepped forward with allegations against Judge Kavanaugh, but Dr. Ford was the only one that was given an audience, and I think this is important because she may have been given an audience for a number of reasons. One is she's obviously a very credible witness, but another one, which has a more a sinister undertone, is that you only get to be heard if you are a person of some importance. So.
Wait, Elizabeth, is that actually true, or is it a matter where these other allegations were so outlandish and so unsubstantiated that there wasn't? I mean, this is what I'm getting at. I think it's a dangerous environment to suggest that pick a heinous crime, murder, rape, whatever, and because the crime is so bad, anyone who accuses anyone of that terrible crime deserves to be believed?
You're right. You're
Wait
right.
a minute.
Yeah. Okay.
There's a distinction here, and one of the reasons that crimes of a sexual nature become so polarizing, Jason, is that you lump all these crimes together, but they shouldn't be lumped in together. Because when you have a dead body, that is with a knife in its heart, that is de facto proof that it's either a suicide or a murder. And if the knife is in the person's back, it's probably going to be a murder. The problem with sexual assault and rape, which is a crime, okay, is that it's not so much the act itself that's the crime, it's what precedes it, which is consent, right? So it's not the fact that there was sexual relations between two people that make the crime. It is whether or not they both gave permission, which is nothing more than words. That's what makes it
now there was
so difficult.
Even under her narrative, there was no sexual act in this scenario. I mean, so already we're talking about.
But wait a minute, before we get into the finer points of the case, the problem that I have is, and the judge repeated this many times, the corroborating witnesses all say there was no party, that the best friend of this woman says she never met Kavanaugh at this party. And there are so many indicators that despite the fact that this is a credible witness, a woman with a very important job and a lot of education, despite that fact, there seems to be no corroboration whatsoever to her allegations.
I'm just curious why these other people weren't.
No. Hold on.
They were offered an opportunity.
I can answer this. You guys are both making a big mistake here. You're asking for the rigor of a bona fide trial when we're given a puppet show, a show trial. This is all the deep state wants to give us. Okay, they want to make it simple. One witness versus the other. They don't want to get into corroborating witnesses and let's reconstruct the scene of the crime and maybe get in some forensic. They didn't even want to introduce the whole polygraph. This is an abbreviated show trial in the crudest form. I think it's an abomination, a mockery of our legal system. As a lawyer, I would be ashamed to participate in such a heinous display. And I think we make a mistake when we expect too much of our government and we expect that they will obey principles such as the rule of law, as has supposedly been in this country since its origins as a colony. Unfortunately, I don't think we really have rule of law because I don't think the elite care about preserving it. I think what they care about is biting each other's heads off, having these public jousts, and the rule of law be damned. They don't care about preserving that in our society.
The bottom line, Jason, is that we had two people today, as Dr. Ford's father was quoted in the Washington Post article. He says, and I'm paraphrasing here, my daughter's statement speaks for itself. You can look at her accomplishments and her background. And obviously, Judge Kavanaugh is also very accomplished. So we have two very accomplished people. They're not known liars, and they both gave testimony. Nothing else was really brought in. So people are going with one testimony, and they're totally contradicting each other.
It's a pure gladiator match.
Okay, so people are going by what the young kids call feels. They're not going by evidence, they're going by feels. Okay,
well,
and
I
think that's
throw a couple of things in.
Yes,
sir.
First off, this thing is a joke because of Feinstein. If she really had it, she had it in her hands, that letter, prior to his approval hearings. It should have been brought out then, but she didn't. So that tells you she was laying a trap, number one. But the thing I saw today that makes me know beyond any shadow of any doubt, because I've done it, you're talking to a trickster here, I've done it. They were trucking along with all these different things that were bothering them. And then somebody mentioned beer. Did you notice how the Democrats instantly went on break, came back after break, and all of a sudden Kavanaugh was an alcoholic?
What?
No, they're They
'Cause he
start.
said
They
he-
change. They
he said he
change the
likes beer.
narrative to Kavanaugh's an alcoholic.
Oh, well,
Yes,
yeah.
they're appealing. Yes, this is classic, as you say, dirty tricks. I mean, you see this happen in trials all the time. I mean that's a trial strategy can change in the middle of the trial, which is like, oh, you know what? This piece of evidence just came out, and we think this is going to play well to our jury. So let's, go down the road of smearing him as an alcoholic alongside being, an abuser.
Yeah, we used to call it open a hole, like in football. When a hole would open up and the running back sees it, he shoots through it.
Right.
So they saw a hole. Something happened. They saw a hole having to do with him kept talking about he liked beer, and they were drinking beer. They went on a 5-minute break. When they came back from the 5-minute break, it was 100% from then until they closed it down.
Well,
Him being an alcoholic and passing out. And did you
you
ever
bring up
wake
a good.
up and
You
not
bring
know
up a
who you
good
were?
point. You bring up a good point. There has been some chatter on social media of Judge Kavanaugh coming across as an angry drunk. He did come across as upset. He did admit to drinking beer, and some people went there and they called him. I can see him being an angry drunk, and that's a little unfortunate.
Right, and it also,
Yeah.
plays off of, stereotypes, dealing with the Irish.
Okay.
I mean, this is, something that, I think. I mean, look, I think it's clear that Kavanaugh is probably not an alcoholic, given the extraordinary discipline that he's conducted his career with. You don't get to the D.C. Circuit by being an alcoholic these days.
Well,
No, and he would watch out for that. He would guard himself from that. His father would have guarded him from that all his life.
Right.
Yeah. So do we yet have enough information to determine, I mean, I guess it's a prediction, which probably each of you are reluctant to make, but do we think Kavanaugh will or will not be confirmed?
I'll tell you my prediction.
I want to go first.
I've already made my prediction on Twitter, so I want to get mine out there.
Okay,
yeah.
then you already made it. Let me go
Well,
first.
let me just
No,
say,
let me go first.
I believe Kavanaugh's going to withdraw his nomination, or he's going to be directed
That
to
was
withdraw.
my idea. I call, in law firms, in high-end law firms, where people like Kavanaugh go to work after law school. I don't know if he actually did, but if you don't cut it, they don't actually tell you don't cut it. They give you what is called a soft offer. So you tell everybody you got the offer, but you're choosing not to go work there. But the law firm tells you in private, we don't want you here, but you can tell everybody you got an offer. It's called a soft offer. So the Beck's prediction is that Kavanaugh is going to get a soft offer, and he's going to withdraw his nomination.
But he's been so adamant that he's not going to be intimidated into backing out of the process.
That is true, Jason. That is true, Jason. But what choice does he have if people come up to him and says, we polled everybody informally, and you're not going to get the nomination? So you can either lose publicly in front of the whole country or just withdraw. Those are your two options. Winning is not an option at this point.
Really?
What would you do? That's a soft offer.
I'm not sure. Larry, what are your thoughts? Do you think Kavanaugh will withdraw? Do you think he'll be confirmed or not confirmed?
Kavanaugh will not be confirmed. They will come at him, the Republicans, and claim, look, we want you, but if we elect you, we'll lose the midterm.
That's right.
Soft offer.
So they're going to they're not going to let him have it. And then when they don't let him get confirmed, that's an absolute loss of the midterm elections for Trump.
Interesting.
It's over. It's over.
Interesting. Okay.
Really?
So Larry, do you think that Kavanaugh, I mean, I'm sure he's going to be apprised of where he stands, in the Senate. Do you think he's just going to press forward and have a vote, or do you think he's just going to just take a step back and say, you know what, I withdraw. I don't want to go through that. I'm just going to retire back to my job at the D.C. Circuit and we'll try to forget this ever happened.
Nurse my sorrows over a beer.
You know, that I don't know. I can't say. He may go another round just to see if there's a break. But if there's no break in what's happened so far, he will resign most probably for the damage that's done to his family. And I wouldn't blame him, nor would most Americans.
Yep. I have to agree with you on that.
That will be so
and
sad.
He's given us a head start on it, because if you notice, he's telling us over and over and over, it has destroyed his family.
Oh, cry me a river.
He said that over and over and over.
I'm sorry.
I think he's being sincere.
He is being sincere, but he needs to put on his big boy pants. He wanted this job.
Yeah, but he didn't expect to be, if this is made up, he didn't expect to be wrongfully accused. I have to say, I find it difficult to believe, given the circumstances, that the judge has explained the woman's best friend even has never met him, doesn't corroborate the story. No one at the party corroborates the story. Feinstein sat on the memo for so long. They seemed so focused in the questioning.
But look,
it's not about the story.
Make the call.
Right.
He's not going to make the call.
That's right.
The Republican leadership's going to make the call.
That's right.
He's not going to get to make it.
Larry's 100% right.
I feel bad for Judge Kavanaugh. I almost feel like he was used in some sort of public spectacle, and his desire for a very plum job plummeted him headfirst into this operation.
But I mean, this happens sometimes. I mean, in the American system, it happened. It happened to Bork. I mean, Clarence Thomas barely escaped, a very similar ordeal. So I think
I've worked with Clarence. I helped Clarence against Anita.
Okay.
I know how dirty it'll get.
Tell us a bit about that, Larry.
Not every judge accepts an invitation to be nominated to the Supreme Court. I know that may come as a surprise. But.
Yeah,
Larry, can you briefly compare and contrast the nomination and confirmation of Clarence Thomas to this one?
Well, the whole main difference is we made it race. This one's not about race. We knew we had it when we were able to make Clarence's opposition about race.
Yeah, you're right.
Bunch of white guys crapping on a black guy.
We had it from the beginning.
Yeah, you're right.
Who's we?
Well, the forces. The Clarence crowd. But I mean, if you look back at that hearing, I remember watching that hearing as a little kid with my grandfather, and I remember him saying very out loud. Well, I remember this very vividly, but my grandfather, who didn't say a whole lot, but we were watching the hearing together, and he said, it's a shame what they're doing to this man. I think that, generally was the sentiment that carried the day at that point in time in history. And I think you're absolutely right, Larry. I think it was race that carried the day in that episode. Unfortunately, I don't think Kavanaugh has
he's not a
trump card. He doesn't have a trump card.
Look, the bottom line is Kavanaugh is not a sympathetic figure. There is nothing he can put forth as a mitigating factor.
Men find him very sympathetic.
That's not true.
No, a lot of men do. A lot of men find him very, very sympathetic.
I think he's been unfairly
a lot of men
accused.
feel that. Yeah, I think Jason can speak to that.
I do understand that there is a concern, especially when it comes to crimes of consent, that somebody can pop out from your past from 40 years ago, who you may have even dated. You know, there was nothing wrong, and all of a sudden she comes forward, and he or she actually can just start saying these things and completely wreck your future. I think that's a very frightening prospect.
Oh, yeah.
I think it faces men way more than women.
I think that's not correct, Elizabeth.
Yeah, but
let me just say this, guys, real quick. Sorry, guys, real quick. The problem I see is this introduces the possibility that any person at all, male or female, could come forward with an accusation of sexual assault at any time and people think they have the right to be believed. This opens the door for liars, fraudsters, and anyone to accuse anybody of anything, and will make every person completely gun-shy, honest people, from doing anything, because they know that their lives, their family, their 10-year-old daughters' lives can be destroyed over what may ultimately be a false accusation. That's very dangerous. We need to stick to innocent until proven guilty. It's one of the founding tenets of the country.
I agree with you, Jason, and I think one of the corollaries to innocent until proven guilty is that the person needs to be apprehended, and his or her innocence needs to be presumed until proven guilty. Part of the reason I think we're in the situation is that so many crimes, even when the evidence is pretty clear, have not been prosecuted. We have judges that say things. For example, there was a judge who, a 15 or 16-year-old girl, she statutory rape by her teacher, who was in his 30s or something, and the judge actually came out and said that she looked older for her age and she could handle it. And I think when people in power say these things and do not do the right thing, and they do it over and over and over again, and give people passes, I think that creates a public, they get fed up, especially women who have been in that situation and who have felt unable to report a crime because they knew they would not believe. Makes them fed up.
Let's take it a step further and just admit that we have an unprosecuted pedophile problem in this country. I'm sorry, what?
They're not in the
that's the other point, Jared. Yeah. They're all screaming for an FBI investigation when there doesn't seem to be adequate evidence to open an investigation. Meanwhile, Feinstein's got a Chinese spy working for her for 20 years. The Clintons have been embezzling and laundering billions of dollars through their foundation. None of them are calling. Bill, there are women coming. Juanita Broderick is in Washington, D.C. today demanding justice for her rape, violent, unwanted sexual intercourse with ejaculation by the man who became president, who remains unprosecuted. There's evidence. There's testimony. Nothing's happening.
Yeah, there's evidence. There's me. I'm the one that had to shut her up.
What did you do?
I just made her be quiet at the time.
Well, what did you do to her?
Well, let's find out a cow eats cabbage.
What's that? This is very interesting to me. I've never existed in your world. What'd you do?
Just explain what could happen when she opened her mouth.
Well, what happened to her? Well, what happened to her?
Pets that were owned by
Juanita.
This is fascinating.
You let them use their own imagination. Don't threaten them with something. Let them use their own imagination. It's usually worse than what you'd come up with.
Here's what I can say. Hang on, Elizabeth, hang on. Here's what I can say without putting Larry directly on the spot. Juanita has told me that, I don't remember if it was her cat or her dog, but one of her pets died.
Oh.
Yep.
Oh, it's just like The Godfather.
Yeah, I mean it's.
But anyway, y'all, let me tell you what I'm worried about.
Yeah.
Do you realize how the court cases are going to flood into the courts that are already overloaded?
Oh yeah, I mean we practice in that legal system. I mean we know what's going to happen. Look, I mean the courts are already seizing up. I mean we have, a number of cases where we're not getting orders. I mean, it's amazing. Like the judges, I mean, I really do think there's a crisis in the federal government right now, and nothing's getting done because, there's so much conflict. People are paralyzed. They're traumatized. They're subjected to this, on a daily basis. Yeah.
How are you going to teach your children, to live a good life, be really good, when you see this man lived that as good a life as a man could live?
Yep.
Clean, I mean. Okay,
Wow.
somebody like me.
We
I
don't know what
understand.
happened at that party. Let's not presume anything. None of us were there.
He said he
Well,
wasn't
None
there.
of us were there. But
Well,
even if he did
It's one
violate it
credible
once, generally
Larry.
he's got his whole life that he's done well.
look,
It's
here's
one
the
credible
question.
witness
Forget
against
Kavanaugh.
another credible witness.
No. Forget Kavanaugh. How are we going to teach our kids to be good people when Hillary Clinton's not in jail? Okay,
Yeah.
that's my question. I ask myself that question every single day, and I don't have a good answer to that. I think as citizens of America, we have to take our country back on many different levels, and really that's all we can do. This is the time to figure out if you're really a patriot or not, and how much you love this country.
Hmm. That's right.
Yeah, but
Because remember, we cannot have two standards of law in this country. We cannot.
Larry, we've had very fine-tuned 1,000 standards of law in this country forever.
Were each of you?
Well, but you can't.
Come on
You
now.
can't. You can't exist in a separate moral universe and exist within the same country. I think that's the issue.
Unless your
going on.
last name is Clinton. Were each of you guys laughing when Barack Obama gave that speech 2 weeks ago where he said there isn't two legal systems?
I don't pay attention to that man anymore.
Yeah, I kind of have a hard time listening to Barack Obama these days. I mean, this is, look, I mean, he's making the rounds. I mean, they're sending their best puppets around to try to, hold the ship, so to speak. But I mean, I think these guys know that, that the jig may possibly be almost up for them.
Well,
and so they're pulling out all the stops.
Exactly. That's why they're acting out in the way that they are. We're getting very close to the end of our hour, guys, and I definitely want to remind everyone watching that they can learn more about Larry by going to nicholslive.com. You can read posts from Larry. He's got blog posts on there. He's got scripts that people can use to call their representatives and tell them to do something about this incredible criminality that's going on. Larry and his team have assembled phone numbers that people can use, so you've got a convenient one-stop shop that you can go to find out who your representative is and how to contact them. And of course, you can financially support Larry at nicholslive.com by clicking on the donate button. Everybody who's on this call definitely needs your support. And of course, Jared and Elizabeth Beck are the founders of jampack.us. They are the legal team that was prosecuting the DNC fraud lawsuit. You can follow them on Twitter. Elizabeth is ELE Beck, and she's the cranky lawyer on Twitter. And Jared, of course, is on there as well. You can follow him, just Jared Beck. Jared is frequently tweeting some really interesting, entertaining, and provocative tweets. He's also the author of What Happened to Bernie Sanders, which you can purchase by, well, for one, you can get it from the CIA-controlled Amazon.com, but you can also go to skyhorsepublishing.com. You can purchase the ebook, you can purchase a hardback book, and you can find out a little bit more about what happened to Bernie Sanders. Guys, is there anything that any of you would like to share with the audience before we wrap it up for tonight?
I mean, you make an interesting point there where you're talking about my book and Amazon. You cannot escape the deep state in this country. That's the number one principle I advocate in analyzing political events. And I think people get too wrapped up in sort of the nuances of the Republican-Democratic battle that goes on, and they neglect to look at the deep politics behind everything. And so they may get confused by how these things shake out, and they may say, this seems really bizarre. Why are these two people, why is the media spending so much time, and then we're spending so many hours as a country discussing a high school party from 40 years ago involving these two people from DC? But once you really understand the deep state and you study it, and there's a lot of great books out there, and I recommend them on my Twitter feed all the time to people so they can really become historians on this topic and dig in, because there's been a lot of great writing about it. I think you can understand the events that are unfolding with more precision, and you may not be as confused or as emotionally manipulated from day to day following these events, because at the end of the day, the deep state wants you to be confused. They don't want you to know what actually is going on, and they want you to be in a state of emotional manipulation and stress.
Yeah.
And one of the things you can do for yourself is to eliminate as much of that emotional manipulation from your life as possible by trying to achieve clarity as to what's really going on.
Remember, folks, we don't live in a democracy, and we don't even live in a republic. We live in an oligarchy. I believe Princeton came out with a study. I know people don't want to swallow that bitter pill, but it's true. And once you start looking through everything through an oligarchic lens, it makes a lot more sense.
Wow.
And Larry, I think you'd be really good to, I bet you have a lot of interesting stories. But you're not telling us.
I don't know. I don't know.
Larry, any closing thoughts?
Great discussion.
Any closing thoughts, Larry?
Well, just as I've always done, folks, please help Jason. This is a good program. It's a good place to learn. He goes to a lot of trouble to get guests. Support it. We need it.
Ditto.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate that. I want to thank each of my guests tonight. Of course, Larry Nichols, Jared and Elizabeth Beck. You guys are fantastic. I really love the mashup, getting guests together that nobody's ever seen in conversation before. I think a lot of interesting things came out. I love speaking to each of you, and we'll see what happens with Judge Kavanaugh. I'll be back tomorrow with Reverse Engineering Crime Scene Investigations with David Hawkins. So please join me. That show is only on Patreon. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
Take care.